Imagine the following. You've just won the lottery. How do you feel? Happy? Your family just died. How do you feel? Sad? Do these simple words really capture the complexity of what you are experiencing? And how do you feel now that I've asked you these questions? Puzzled? Confused? Conflicted? Offended? Maybe all of those. But are these words and labels really distinct feelings? Or do they all collapse into one? If you show this video to someone else, would he or she feel the same? Would anyone actually feel precisely the same as you do? Emotions are a mind-boggling, complex, and beautifully mystical mess. But as it stands right now, our common perception and understanding of emotions is vague and ambiguous at best, full of misconceptions and outdated ideas. So let's maybe start by officially stating that emotions and feelings are not the same. Emotions also are not universal. Emotional intelligence most probably isn't what you think it is, and you may not even have heard of emotional granularity, emotional literacy, or why we even have evolved emotions in the first place. And this is where the issue starts really. Emotions are something we all agree on while continuously disagreeing about. That is also why we need to fix the way we speak about emotions. And speaking about emotions effectively does not mean that we all need to turn into overly empathetic softies or super stoic scientists. Learning how to speak about emotions helps to avoid mistakes and misunderstandings in everyday life, as well as in relationships that really matter to you. It helps expressing yourself more effectively, more accurately, and in a way that others can relate to, despite their personal level of empathy or emotional intelligence. And whether you consider emotions important or not does not really matter, since emotions are unavoidable. And one part of learning how to live with them is to learn what they are all about. Emotions are energy in motion. Even though I loved this definition in the beginning, I learned to hate it. Mainly because it is a statement, an idea, but not a definition. It produces a kind of a dumbfounding aha moment, but it does not explain anything. What energy? What kind? Electricity? Heat? Thinking energy? Emotion energy? Magic? Magic! 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 And where does it move? Why does it move? What does the movement actually do? And I won't claim that it's like totally misguided and wrong, although I don't really know the original source and context and basis of this quote, and no, it is not Tony Robbins, and even if it would be, I would not care much.
How many agree with me on this? Raise your hand, say aye!
Regardless, this quote is just incredibly inaccurate and vague, and it actually does not push the conversation forward. At this point, it is just a meme. Instead, let's maybe look at the word origin. Emotions go back to the French word émouvoir. Probably butchered this pronunciation, which means to stir up, and which seems a pretty accurate description of how overwhelming emotions feel like compared to our more composed default state. Going back a bit further, we arrive at the Latin word emovere, which translates to move out. And whoopsie. And that is a good hint at what emotions might actually be. It is something that is happening inside of and gets expressed through us, moving from the inside out.
Where did you read that?
It doesn't matter, I read it and it's great.
And I want to be honest with you, defining emotions in a subsection of a video is kind of stupid. People have spent books and books on it and they still struggle to pin it down, which is beautiful, I think. Everyone loves a good mystery, but it's also the reason why I will only go this far trying to define them, because that's a whole beast of its own, and that deserves a whole video of its own, and that might already be in the making. For now, let's distinguish between emotions and feelings. A basic way to describe the difference is that emotions are the raw sensory data. It is what is happening in our body and what we register happening. Feelings are our subjective experience of this experience. To feel an emotion is to consciously assign meaning to it. An uncomfortable gut feeling, contracting muscles, paired with an electric burst and an explosively expanding heat wave in your body, maybe a stinging presence and pressure somewhere around your head. The collective experience of these symptoms, that could be described as an emotion. Actually, even more basic than that, the changes of blood pressure, hormone release, the firing of your neurons, all that, that's emotion. Calling this thing discomfort, perplexity, or dismay in face of an information that is potentially challenging your worldview, that's a feeling. See what I did there? So yeah, emotions and feelings are not the same. And as you will experience in this video, you definitely still can use them as synonyms because the line, linguistically and practically speaking, is pretty blurry. It's still useful to make this distinction because that's what we have words and language for. Otherwise, we could just call everything duh. How do you feel?
Duh.
Is it duh or is it more like the?
Duh.
The?
Duh.
The?
Duh.
Duh. Duh. Duh.
Duh.
Duh.
Duh. Ja.
Good talk. Good talk. But here is a very interesting caveat before we move on to the next section. No one felt emotions before about 1830. Instead, they felt other things. Passions, accidents of the soul, moral sentiments, and explained them very differently from how we understand emotions today. And the reason I find this so interesting is that the common sense about emotions is very different. These days, pretty much everyone seems to agree on that there are emotions and there always have been, and how else should the world have f***ing looked like? But apparently, that wasn't always the case. Emotions just weren't a thing, no one was talking about it. They literally had to be discovered, which doesn't mean that people have not been feeling these things. Always. But what it does is it shows how the common understanding of something changes by improving our ideas of it. It's just such a startling example of how misleading common sense can be. And there are two other truisms we need to let go of before we move on. Number one is the overly romantic view, that emotions are magical and unexplainable and beyond human comprehension and a deeper level of consciousness. But only the good ones. The bad ones are only primitive expressions of your lower bodily manifestations. Whatever that means exactly. Anyways, we could call this view mysticism, and just like the quote from the beginning, it does not explain anything. And this is an explainer video, so that's not very helpful, is it? Number two is the overly rational view, which states emotions are nothing but physical phenomena. Period. Pure functionalism. Feelings are only biochemistry. That's a thing that I have heard at different times throughout my school time, which is wrong for so many reasons, but mostly because emotions are more than that. Otherwise, they would be meaningless. But they aren't. And everyone who has ever felt something knows that. So where do our preconceived notions of emotions actually come from? Mostly from what you would call the classical view. The idea here is that emotions are universal. Everyone all around the world feels the same feelings. There are 6 basic emotions: anger, happiness, surprise, disgust, sadness, and fear. Emotions are built in, they are intuitive, and they are essential. This was the dominating scientific theory for years to come, and it still persists to be our common understanding of it. But the problem with it is that there are many problems. First, all the original facial expressions that were used to conduct the experiments that proved this very point were staged. They are fake. These photos that were used are not snapshots of people that were caught in an emotional state. They're not even regular people. Those are actors that have been paid to display and portray particular emotions. And when you think about it, it absolutely makes sense. People who are happy don't walk the streets smiling all day. Well, some do, maybe. And people who are sad don't walk around crying all day. Basically, everybody who has a resting bitch face knows that what your face displays does not mirror your internal state or mental reality. But there's more! It turns out that if you don't provide people with those 6 basic emotions, that is to say, if you don't give them those exact 6 words, they assign completely different meanings to the faces. Sometimes getting things right, quote-unquote, but rather often not. And that's still not all. The experiments conducted with other cultures outside of the West or even with remote living hunter-gatherer tribes were only performed after instructing them, and even testing or questioning them beforehand so that scientists could make sure that people understood how the experiment works. So what they actually proved is that basically everybody all around the world is able to learn an emotion concept and assign a word to it. And I do not claim that this has been done purposefully or with intent, but it rather seems to simply be an unfortunate case of naive realism, seeing the world for what you want it to be. People and scientists believe this theory to be true precisely because it seems so intuitive. So everybody was looking only for proof, but not any further. Which over the last years has actually changed quite a bit, with a different, new view emerging. The core idea of the constructionist view is variation, not uniformity, is the norm. Not only are emotions distinct, but also how we experience and how we label them. And that doesn't mean that everybody is feeling something completely different. But what it definitely does mean is that there is a whole lot more than just 6 categories, a whole lot more dimensions, and that facial expressions or even internal states are not the only way to perceive or express emotions. That's only what we do in the West. The rest of the world might be, or actually most certainly, is different. Under the constructionist view, emotions are also not essential, they are useful. We evolved emotions for a purpose. We, meaning the whole of our existence, our biology as well as our mind, construct emotions as signals for adjusting our behavior, to navigate the world and ultimately to survive in the game of life. That's why we need another useful distinction. If you're anything like me, you might have read the same word twice, introception and introception. Yeah, so it turns out, if you're anything like me, you might actually wonder whether you're slightly dyslexic or just simply stupid, because I kind of made up a word, it seems. I mean introspection, not introception, whatever that's supposed to be. I guess a mixture of introspection and interoception. Anyways, it makes what I say next also just even more ironic. I personally have misread the second term, by the way, for probably half the length of the book that I'm basing this very video on. And I'll keep doing it, so please feel free to insert introspection whenever I say the other one. Please. Introception, the term you and I may be familiar with, describes the capacity to understand your emotions and make sense out of them. Interoception, the term my Kindle could not explain to me with its offline capacities, describes the ability to perceive internal changes in our body, like a growling stomach, a dry mouth, tense muscles, a racing heart, headaches, stress, or even changes in blood pressure. Interoception is also the counterpart to what we more naturally seem to experience in everyday life, exteroception, perceiving the world through our 5 senses. And there are actually more than 5 of them, but let's not do this today. The bottom line is, interoception is what makes us perceive emotions, introception is what helps us make sense out of them. And they kind of go hand in hand. But you can also perceive them somewhat independently from one another. You can, for instance, register changes in your body without interpreting them as emotions. For instance, you can feel sore or sick, or even pain these days is categorized as an emotion. Why? Because it's subjectively as fuck, by the way. That's one reason, at least. I've probably not explained this very well. Anyway, pain, emotion, Google it. These are predominantly physical experiences. And likewise, you can analyze your thoughts and the state you are in without a particular emotion dominantly present. One part of this is something called metacognition, which is basically being able to think about your thoughts. Another part is something you might at times be more or less aware of, and something you cannot really get rid of. Not even through meditation. Mood, or what scientists call affect, is more basic than emotions. Mood is the baseline for your thinking and feeling at a particular time. It's like brightness or loudness for emotions. It is always there. Commonly, we tend to speak about someone being in a good or a bad mood, but there are actually way more dimensions to it. We can distinguish between arousal and valence. Arousal describes how agitated we are, and valence describes how pleasant or unpleasant we experience our state. High arousal with positive valence describes, for instance, states like excitement or happiness. Low arousal and negative valence is what you perceive as being tired, bored, or even depressed. High arousal with negative valence feels tense, frustrating. Low arousal with positive valence, on the other hand, could be described as contentment, feeling calm or relaxed. Understanding the idea of mood or affect as our emotional baseline is crucial to engage with the concept of affective niches. Your affective niche determines what you are able to feel, and with that, what you are able to perceive at a given time. When you are frustrated or sad, it's very easy to dismiss everything good about a situation. And being excited over something, on the other hand, often results in dismissing risks or fears. That is how affect affects reality. And when that happens, it is called affective realism. Perceiving the world colored by our mood and emotions. And you probably know that to be true, since the best worldview we can have, that is to say, the most accurate and flexible worldview we can have, usually is not accompanied by emotional extremes, but can rather be found somewhere in the middle of our mood circle. But even our affective niches can be vast or limited, depending on our personal level of emotional granularity and emotional literacy. Being able to tell apart your emotions isn't something naturally given. You might have felt that anger does not always feel the same. There is annoyance, irritation, resentment, fury, rage, and many more flavors to it. The way you are angry with a child differs very much from the way you are angry with a friend, or with a lover, or your parents, or a stranger, and the same goes for happiness. A feeling ranging from feeling excitedly ecstatic to calm and content. Emotional granularity is the ability to tell apart what you feel, even if you may lack the words. It is like tasting different flavors or distinguishing between different colors. Someone with extremely low emotional granularity might only see shades of black and white, dark and bright. Someone with more emotional granularity might be able to perceive red, blue and green, or experience the mix of those, resulting in magenta, cyan and yellow. And someone with high emotional granularity might be able to tell apart coral, scarlet, crimson, ruby, burgundy maroon and all 50 shades of red alone. Being able to feel these feelings and their differences is one part. Naming them is another. That is emotional literacy. It is your vocabulary to express to yourself and others what this distinct assembly of interoceptive perception means and how it manifests in your reality. Emotional granularity is the ability to tell the colors apart. Emotional literacy is the ability to name them. And one does not necessarily presuppose the other. These are skills that by no means come intuitively or natural to us, but I think you can, you need, and you should learn them. Sure, some of us might have a better knack for them, depending on our upbringing, the environment we grew up in, and the influences we have been exposed to through our life. But others live in a world where they feel a lot, but are provided with 6 words at best to feel and express their own vast emotional universe. Language is probably the best proof for the variety of emotions. How do you call the feeling of blissful nostalgic sadness? The Portuguese call it saudade. What do you call the feeling you have when you see something unbearably cute? Filipinos call it giggly. When you are looking forward to something so much you can almost feel it, the Dutch call it voorpret. Ever felt bittersweet joy about something you know would not last long? Japanese may call it momo no aware. You are missing the feeling of wanderlust in faraway places? Germans call it Fernweh. The feeling of existential sadness for no particular reason? Russian-speaking countries call this Tosca. Variation is the norm, diversity is richness, and language is key. Now, with all that being said, what does it actually mean to be emotionally intelligent? Like with pretty much everything in the realm of emotions, there is a commonsensical notion out there, namely that one's emotions are intelligent. Sounds stupid? It is! Of course, nobody phrases it like this because it sounds stupid, let's be honest. Instead, people assume that whatever they feel about someone or something is perfectly accurate. They assume their emotions equal reality. We now know that this is what you would call affective realism, but the whole idea that you can detect emotions is grounded in the classical view. When you believe emotions are universal, you believe everybody feels the way you do, and you believe that you can detect and recognize emotions in others accurately. But if you take the Constructionist view and you acknowledge that variation may reign supreme, not only room for misjudgment opens up, but it becomes evidently clear that you perceive emotions. You do not recognize or detect them, you guess and you judge them based on your personal experience, your mood, your affective niche, your emotional granularity and literacy. You make meaning from what you feel, even when feeling for someone else. And being aware of that is part of emotional intelligence, the ability to perceive, judge, regulate and act on emotions. It is what this video is all about. Okay, what a deep dive. If there's anything you can take away from this video, I hope that it's not that you try to learn all those terms that I've been throwing around, because I can barely keep them in my mind myself. You can apply all those concepts that I've spoken about without recalling particular names. But what I sincerely hope for with this video is that more people become aware of the multidimensionality and diversity of emotions and start treating them as such. A fascinating multi-layered phenomenon, far from being simple and universal. Personally, I would love to understand the role of emotions in other cultures, but through assuming emotions as universal and projecting our Western worldview onto the rest of it, we are missing a whole lot. Shame, despite being feared and avoided in the West, is desirable and admirable in Islamic cultures. Gratitude, for us being an expression of happiness, can be obligatory and even become a burden in cultures like Japan. While there has been a long trend of over-rationalizing things and reducing everything to physics, biology or chemistry, some people have taken the reverse initiative, over-romanticizing feelings while devaluing everything physical and discounting the analytical workings of our mind. What lies at the core of this debate is the dichotomy between body and mind, between the heart and the brain, which is not only redundant, but simply wrong. But this is what the next video will be about. Until then, I see you. Okay, a little bit of an addendum. If you want to investigate this topic more by yourself, I much recommend the book I based this video on, which is How Emotions Are Made by Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, and also the other book, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain. Both books are not only incredibly interesting, but also very enjoyably written. Two of my most favorite books ever. Some people complain they're too technical, but I really think they're not. They're just very precise. That's how I would put it. But that's just me. If you'd like to hear another perspective and you rather subscribe to the audio experience more than reading, there are lots of podcasts out there, either interviews with Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett herself, or one that I've lately enjoyed was from Andrew Huberman, so you might as well dig into that. That's it. That's really it. I wonder how long this video will be once I've edited it, but that's for future Wojtek to worry. Thanks for watching. I see you.